Well, we're a week into training camp, so it seems like this is as good a time as any to have some predictions about Pitt's offensive players. A few bold-ish predictions. I don't know how bold these predictions are. It's not anything really crazy, but I think it's, somewhat reasonable to make some predictions that at least a few of Pitt's individual offensive players will reach some benchmarks that not many players in Pitt history have reached. Could we be on the verge of a historic season for Pitt, at least in terms of individual offensive production? I think it's possible. And I think there's a few numbers. I got the old legal pad out over here. I'll bring it up for a visual aid in a minute. But I think when you look at some of the numbers, it's pretty conceivable that a couple of these guys on Pitt's offense could put their names in the record books for all time, for, all of Pitt football history, for whatever that's worth. And, of course, a lot of the offensive production in Pitt football history has come in more recent years, but nevertheless, what could we see in 2025? Could we see some record book level production from a handful of guys on Pitt's offense? I think so. And I'm going to give you those predictions here on the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, it's Wednesday. It's the Morning Pitt. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, hanging out with you today for a little Pitt sports talk. You know the website below, Panther-Lair.com. It's the Pitt site on the 24/7 Sports Network. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And message boards interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are hanging out on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, talking to other Pitt fans about everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. We provide the coverage and the content. You provide the community and the conversation. It's a good time. I hang out on the message boards all the time. Jim Hammond hangs out on the message boards. All our basketball staff hangs out on the message boards all the time. And then you, the Pitt fans, can hang out on the message boards all the time at Panther-Lair.com. And then, of course, our YouTube channel right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's a place you can get all of our Pitt video content, these daily morning Pitt videos, Monday through Friday, our weekly live show that we usually do every Wednesday night, which will be tonight, but with a little scheduling conflict. So we did it last night, but it's always 8:30 p.m., usually on Wednesdays. And that's right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then we have post-game shows, interviews, press conferences, all those kinds of things. All right here, all kinds of Pitt video content, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You want to make sure you never miss any of our Pitt video content. Like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So when we move the live show, we're not going to do it on Wednesday night. We move it to Tuesday night or Thursday night or whatever it may be on any given week. If you're subscribed to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, you turn on your notifications, you'll get an alert sent to your phone every time we go live, so you won't miss a thing. All right, let's talk about some predictions. Do you know there are only 5 times in Pitt history that a Pitt quarterback has thrown for 3,000 yards? Did you know that? Can you name them all? You can probably name most of them. I'm going to bring up my list because I'm pretty sure I can name them all off the top of my head, but I don't want to miss any. I'm sorry, 6 times. 6 times in Pitt history that a quarterback has thrown for 3,000 yards in a season. Can you name them all? Number 6, Tyler Palko threw for 3,067 in 2004. Number 5, Kenny Pickett threw for 3,098 in 2019. Number 4, Alex Van Pelt threw for 3,163 in 1992. Number 3, this one that might have taken you a minute to come up with. You might have guessed most of these. You might have forgotten the Kenny Pickett in 2019, and you might have forgotten the Tino Sinceri in 2012 threw for 3,288. Number 2, most prolific passing season in Pitt history, Rod Rutherford in 2003, threw for 3,679. And the number 1 passing season in Pitt history, you guessed it, right as he pops up on the screen, Mr. Kenny Pickett threw for 4,319 in 2021. So our prediction here, as you might have guessed, is that Pitt will get its 7th 3,000-yard passing season in 2025. Now, this hinges on a few caveats, of course, the biggest one of which being that Eli Holstein stays healthy. And, we, through the offseason, entertained a lot of thoughts about Mason Heinschel and still kind of keeping that in the back of our mind that Mason Heinschel had a great spring and has drawn some comparisons to Kenny Pickett in terms of his, just how he's been very unfreshman-like in his time since he arrived at Pitt. But when it comes down to it, we still think Eli Holstein's going to hold on to the starting job. We still think Eli Holstein's going to be the guy. And we think Eli Holstein is going to be closer to what he was in the first 5 games than what he was in his final 5 starts. And I mean, some of those starts he didn't play the full game. When it came down to it, Eli Holstein basically played 8 full games. All right, 8 full games. I forget what his final snap count ended up being in the Virginia game. He did attempt like 23 passes, so maybe we should include that one as well. But it's basically the first 7 games. It was the first 8 games of the season because he got knocked out of the Virginia game with an injury. He got knocked out of the Louisville game with an injury. So those were his 10 starts. The 7-0 start, the SMU game, and then those 2 that I just mentioned, Virginia and Louisville, that he got knocked out of. Pitt was 7-3 in the games when Eli Holstein started. But obviously, like we say, the Louisville game was shortened due to injury. The Virginia game was shortened due to injury. Roll the clock back and just look at those first 8 games when he started the full game, and Eli Holstein averaged 257 passing yards per game. Project that over a 13-game season, and you have 3,341 yards. So through 8 games, Eli Holstein was on pace to be a 3,000-yard passer. Now, we know not every game is created equal. We know that those on-pace and average numbers can be skewed, and they certainly were, by the fact that he had 350 yards and 3 touchdowns in each of his first 5 games, and then fell off a little bit when he faced Cal, when he faced Syracuse. SMU, he still threw for like 248 or something, so the numbers were okay there. But Cal and Syracuse, I'm not sure that he got over 200 passing yards in either one of those games. I don't, and I mean, there's no way to prove this or disprove this. I don't think Eli Holstein would have continued throwing for 200 or less in all of the other games. In the Clemson game, the remainder of the Virginia game, the Boston College game, the Louisville game. I think he would have had more 300-yard games along the way. The Toledo game, let's include that as well because we're talking about over a 13-game season. But I do believe Eli Holstein still can be that quarterback that he showed in the first 5 games last season, not to mention the first 7 games last season. As a second-year starter, a second year of learning the offense and playing in this offense, I think Eli Holstein can be that guy again, and I think he can be it over, for a consistent basis, and I think he can be it over the course of the season. I really do, and I mean, by the end of camp, it might be the Mason Heinzel show or the Cole Gonzalez show. But I'll sit here on Wednesday, August 6th, and I'll make the prediction that, Eli Holstein holds on to the starting job and that Eli Holstein plays well enough to get a 3,000-yard season. Now, when we talk about some of those other 3,000-yard seasons, obviously you're going to be in a pretty prolific passing attack if you're going to get 3,000 yards. I mean, Kenny Pickett went for 3,000 yards in 2019 because they threw the ball 3,000 times. He might have averaged 1 yard per attempt because that team didn't have a running game. They just, that's how Maurice French ended up with 91 receptions or whatever he had that season to become, I think, at the time, the all-time leader in single season receptions. He had 96, excuse me. And he averaged like less than 8 yards per catch because that was effectively their running game. So, the offensive scheme helped there. Obviously, the Rod Rutherford year and the Tyler Palko year in 2004 when those guys went for 3,000 yards, they were in a pass-friendly system. Tino Sinceri in 2012, not so much playing for Paul Chryst, but he was pretty efficient and had, he had some good players on that team. I think one of the things that will benefit Eli Holstein in a quest for 3,000 yards, in addition to his experience both on the field and in learning the offense, is also the fact that, this offense is going to throw the ball a lot. They were a prolific passing offense. That's what a lot of it's going to be based on. I know Cade Bell has talked about they want to run the ball more, run the ball better, but they're still going to throw the ball a ton. This is going to be an offense that throws the ball all over the place, and that should lend itself nicely to the quarterback getting over 3,000 yards, in addition to some of the other stats we're going to bring up here and the other predictions we're going to make. So that's prediction number 1. Eli Holstein goes for 3,000 yards. And I think as long as he stays healthy, that one should be pretty attainable. This next one's going to take some doing. It's going to take a guy who was really good last year being even better this year, staying on the field, playing a lot, and potentially putting his name in the history books. Because in Pitt history, there have only been 2 players who reached 2,000 all-purpose yards. Only 2. It was Tony Dorsett in 1976 and Quadri Henderson in 2016. 50 years apart. 40 years apart. I can do the math. 9 years later, I'm predicting that it's going to happen again. Desmond Reed last year had 1,541 yards from scrimmage. He had 962 rushing, 579 receiving. He also had 159 punt returns, or 159 yards on 13 punt returns. So you add that all together, and you end up with, I don't know why I didn't write down the number, 1,700 all-purpose yards over the course of 11 games played. Of course, and now we do the on-pace thing again, right? Because that works out to an average of 154.5 yards, all-purpose yards per game. That pace over 13 games, 2,009 all-purpose yards. Desmond Reed, when he was on the field, was on pace for 2,000 all-purpose yards. He was a 2,000 all-purpose yard player. He just only played 11 games instead of 13. Can he get to 2,000 this year? I'm going to say, like, my prediction is he will. So I'm going to stick with that. But I'm going to, we often have this conversation about Des Reed and durability and injuries and staying on the field. I don't think Desmond Reed is any more prone to injury than any other running back. Like his size, I think he's shown that he's tough, that he's durable, he can take a beating and keep going. He will probably miss at least one game this season, I think. I think he will. Maybe it benefits his stats that the FCS game is in the first game of the season. When it's in the fourth or fifth game or something, it's a little bit easier to sit him down and give him a rest game. I'm guessing they'd be less likely to do that in the first game of the season. But I think Desmond Reed, if he can get 12 games, if Desmond Reed can play 12 games this year, he needs to average 167 all-purpose yards per game. That's not that much. Last year, he had 6 games with at least 139 offensive yards. If you get that, you only need like less than 30 more yards per game on special teams, all-purpose yards, right? I shouldn't even say that. If you can get 139 yards, 140 yards offensive, you're less than 30 yards away from that average of 167. And he's going to have games where he goes over 167. He's going to have games where he gets 200 all-purpose yards or 250 all-purpose yards. And he's going to have games with 150 all-purpose yards. And there's going to be a mix and match. The punt return yards will come and go. And I do think he's going to continue on punt returns. I don't think they're going to take him off that duty. And I'm coming around to the idea that they should keep him on that job because he's really good. He's an explosive player. And I didn't realize last year was Desmond Reed's first year working as a punt returner. He never caught punts. He never returned punts at Western Carolina. And the first time he returns a punt, he goes 71 yards for a touchdown against Kent State. Pretty good harbinger of things to come. Now, he didn't really get much the rest of the way. As I said, he had 159 punt return yards last year, so he had 71 on like one return, so he had about 88 the rest of the season on the other 12 returns he had. But he's dangerous enough. And I talked to Jacob Bernowski, the special teams coordinator and tight ends coach at Media Day last week, and I was, asking him about Desmond Reed, and he was like, I was like, he's out there. Do you even expect him to have many opportunities to return kicks? And he's like, well, first of all, if they try to kick it away from him on a punt return, it's going to go out of bounds, and that benefits us field position-wise. And I said, well, that's a good point. And he said, second of all, Des had no idea what he was doing last year in terms of how to track the ball and make returns. He said they had way too many punts that they just let bounce. He's like, at least you got to make the fair catch. You can't just let it bounce and roll back toward the end zone. He said, but with more practice and a better understanding of the position and the job and the responsibilities, Desmond Reed should get more opportunities to return punts this year. And every time he gets an opportunity to return punts, he's going to be piling up those all-purpose yards. I think it's completely doable that he averages 165, 170 all-purpose yards per game over the course of 12 games. If he plays 13 games, he only has to average 155. I think he's capable of doing that. And I think it'll happen. And for the third time in Pitt history. And then the last one is the 1,000-yard receiver. And that's Kenny Johnson. Of course, that's who our prediction is going to be about. There's only been 11 instances of a 1,000-yard season in Pitt history. Most recently was Jared Wayne in 2022. Of course, Jordan Addison the year before that. I think Kenny Johnson gets there. And I know we've talked so much about Kenny Johnson this offseason. We've talked about him needing to step it up. He needs to be the wide receiver one and all that kind of thing. And last year his numbers were off of that. But I went back and looked. Kenny Johnson only had 4 games when he saw 6 targets or more. Konate Mumpfield had 10 games with 6 targets or more. Konate Mumpfield, who ended up being Pitt's leading receiver with, I have the stat sheet right here. Konate Mumpfield led Pitt. He had 52 catches for 813 yards and 5 touchdowns. Okay. And that was with, actually, he only played 12 games. So he saw 6 targets or more in 9 out of 12 games. Kenny Johnson saw 6 targets or more in only 4 games. In those 4 games, when Kenny Johnson saw 6 targets or more, he caught 22 passes for 266 yards and 2 touchdowns. You want to know what that's the pace for? Over the course of 4 games, you catch 22 passes for 266 and 2 touchdowns. That's a pace over 13 games for 72 receptions, 865 yards, and 7 touchdowns. If somebody put up that stat line, 72 for 865 and 7 in 2024, they would have been 5th in the ACC in receptions, 7th in receiving yards, and tied for 8th in receiving touchdowns. You'd be talking about a top 8 receiver, and in some respects, a top 5 receiver in the conference with that kind of stat line. That's the pace Kenny Johnson was on in the 4 games when he actually got a healthy target share. Curiously, those 4 games were Boston College, SMU, Kent State, and Toledo, 3 of which Pitt lost, but let's not push that. Now, so that pace, his 6 target per game pace, gave him 865 yards over the course of 13 games. Well, that's not 1,000. But to get to 1,000, he'd only need 135 more yards. Over 13 games, that's only 10 yards per game more than he averaged when he saw 6 targets per game last season. So if Kenny Johnson really is the wide receiver one, if he's the primary target for Eli Holstein, if he's going to get peppered with targets like Konate Mumpfield did last year, 6, 7, 8, 9 targets on a regular basis, there's no reason this guy can't go over 1,000 yards and join a group that includes Jordan Addison, Larry Fitzgerald, I'm sure Antonio Bryant, right? Yeah, Antonio Bryant. Tyler Boyd had a couple of 1,000-yard seasons. Jonathan Baldwin had a 1,000-yard season. Lateef Grimm, Dietrich Gels, Greg Lee, all the superstars. There's no reason Kenny Johnson can't join that group if he gets the kind of workload that he should, which is a number 1 wide receiver's workload. I think he can turn it into more than Konate Mumpfield turned it into last year. If he can get that kind of target share over 9, 10, 11, 12 games, which he should. When you look at Pitt's receiving core, when you look at Kenny Johnson's talent, his experience and knowledge and all that stuff, he should be getting 6 to 9 or 10 targets every game. And if he does, I think he'll turn it into a 1,000-yard season. So book it right now. 3,000-yard season for Eli Holstein, 2,000 all-purpose yard season for Desmond Reed, 1,000-yard season for Kenny Johnson. It's only the first week of camp, and we're already making bold predictions about guys making Pitt history. So, yeah, we're living the high life over here at Panther-Lair.com. All right, make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com so you never miss any of our Pitt video content, and then check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pitt site on the 24/7 Sports Network. Thanks so much for tuning in for today. I hope you've had a great week so far. Thanks for adjusting for the live stream last night. And I think that's about it. Have a great Wednesday. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.